This is Joshua Peterson. We're here today in Loveland, Colorado off of 287. We got a phone call from a motel saying that they had power out. It's a 3-story motel with a pool and an elevator and whatnot. Basically said that the lights were flickering in the main level through the hallway, the elevator, some of the rooms and the pool area and the laundry room area. And by the time we got here in 30 minutes, they said that it stopped flickering. Well, that's a sign that there's going to be a precondition that's coming up real quick. So really what it needs is preventative maintenance before it does get an expensive cost for repairing it. Basically what we have here today is going to be a 3-phase system. So our ground, our black, our red, our blue, and our white. And this is feeding a single-phase panel on this side. And what we found here was that the aluminum inside of here was squirted on these breakers. If you read these breakers correctly, they will say ALM and CU rated, aluminum and copper rated, or AL/CU. So you do not have to squirt, if you will, or apply deox inside of these breakers. And really when that happens, what has to happen is once this paste, which is called a deox compound, this has to be cleaned out. Otherwise, it does not allow conductivity. So aluminum expands and contracts based upon current, ambient temperature, also heat, as well as just itself as a conductive conductor. It's not going to be rated as well as copper, of course. So it's typically about, every time you do your ampacity chart, you're about 2 sizes higher on aluminum instead of copper in order to get that better conductivity. So anyways, when they squirted or applied the deox inside of there, that's what can start to hinder the flickering. Well, none of the lugs are overheated, otherwise these breakers wouldn't even tighten back down. These 2 flathead screw terminals for the breaker itself, it's 100 amp Siemens. Well, when we fed this over here, we also had to clean out all of this deox in there. So we made sure, of course, our power is dead, traced that out. We know that this sub-panel is a single-phase sub-panel instead of a 3-phase. So inside of here, we had to clean off all of this old deox on top and around. And then after we did that, we also made sure that our lugs are not overheated. Now, as you can see, this one's got a little bit of heat starting on that. And how I know that is because you look at this, the ground. This is a lot cleaner looking. So what we're going to do is apply some machine threaded oil so we can allow this to screw back down a lot better and tighten up. This is just a temperature oil that we use for drilling our cabinets anytime we have unibits or some of our knockouts that we have to drill. It keeps our bits cooler from starting to burn up. Okay, I'm going to let that sit on there here. Now, if you're a maintenance gentleman or a handyman that works for a hotel or motel, I do not suggest you doing this unless you know what you're doing. Typically you should be licensed in the state of Colorado to be doing this kind of work on panels, because if you hit the wrong breaker and you're not traced out correctly and you go to touch something, you could definitely hurt yourself. Anyway, so we're going to let that oil sit in there. We cleaned off all of our conductors here. There's no overheating. Typically it's going to melt backwards. Article 110.14 talks about the weakest link in the chain in the code book, and so when aluminum is probably rated at 60 degrees Celsius and our breakers here are about 40 to 60, well, our copper over here is going to be rated at more of a 90 degrees Celsius column in 310.16, especially if it has a THWN-2 rating. These are going to have a higher rating for 90 degrees Celsius. So of course you're not going to see that breakdown here, but you will here. Now, one thing the maintenance guy was concerned about, since this is the pool room, and look at all the acidicness that's happening from just the chemicals in the pool room, this is just rusting this cabinet paint right off over the last 15, 20 years. So yes, that is starting to happen a little bit in the panel, especially in the neutral. But what you can do in here is just take a bristle brush on the end of your drill and just clean that off. But anyways, for this purpose, what we're showing them here, we're going to reapply. I used to use a Burndy paste. I got it at my wholesale house. It is rated for aluminum. It is a deox compound, which is called a penetrox. Excuse me if I slaughtered that. We're going to apply all this on right here. Now there is times that I've gotten into the panel and I've realized that this isn't going to work. The lugs are so stripped out, I either A, could not get the lug off, or excuse me, the screw out of the lug, or B, I couldn't get the screw threaded back in. And it ends up cross-threading or it just ends up welding itself. But by the time I usually see that, I could take my thermometer and see if that panel was running hot when I walked up and turned everything on and started doing a load test. I could actually start to see that lug, whichever was going bad, glow. Most likely it's not the neutral, but typically 9 times out of 10 it's going to be one of your phase conductors there. So we're going to apply that deox, really thick paste on there, really well. And now we're going to install, be careful because our neutral is coming this way. I did not disconnect our neutral, so keep this in mind that we're not running current on either phase. If I was, my neutral would be carrying the imbalance because it's single phase. But if I had a 3-phase system running on a single phase, so basically when you're looking at this is connecting here to A and B. So C is not even having the extra load of this panel. So typically you're going to see A and B a little bit warmer on these 2 conductors for running current as well as possibly the terminal connections in there. But I don't see any overheating going on, and it's copper in here, so I'm not worried about that. So I'm going to apply this back on. Again, be careful because that neutral there, but my breaker's off, so there's nothing should be fed out of this panel. And I know that I don't have a bottom lug fed panel going out and in. Okay, so I know that this is completely off, so I can touch the neutral. I'm threading that in. I just want to get that oil in there so that way we don't have any issue with threading. And if there is, then this panel has to be changed out. Maybe I can possibly get the guts, maybe not. So as you start to see that you don't have enough deox in there, it doesn't hurt to apply just a little bit straight inside there if I'm missing a little bit on the end of that aluminum feeder. And that aluminum feeder is just a typical URD type. So guys, preventative maintenance is really important in panels, especially with aluminum. It's no different than dealing with your car and you're trying to keep that transmission running cool. Well, you got to change your fluids. This is no different than that. And this is pretty much a, dealing with a transmission when you're dealing with something inside of this panel. Same with changing your motor oil or any of your differential fluids on your car if you have a 4x4 system. Anyways, thanks for joining us, guys. We'll talk to you next week.